Welcome to Politics Not Included, where we get to know the person, not their policy. We're creating a space to have real conversations with your elected officials and election candidates to get to know them as a person first. We're hoping these conversations will make it easier to approach and engage your local leadership. Now, before we get started with today's episode, I have a couple of ground rules to cover as always. The first is, Politics Not Included is hosted by the Transparent Campaign Initiative. And in the spirit of transparency, these episodes will be published without being edited. And we're doing this to keep this platform neutral and authentic to all of the guests that we have on the show. Now, what that means for you as a listener or a viewer if you're on our YouTube channel is that you may witness or hear longer pauses than anticipated or some bloopers or stumbling over words. And that's because you're watching or listening to this conversation as if it were live. You're hearing the whole thing in its entirety. And I'm excited to get to share these conversations with you in a true and authentic form. And that leads me to rule number 2, that as you're watching or listening to this, if you have any comments that creep up in your head that if you were sitting in this room with us, you may not have the confidence to say to our face, or you may not feel like the best human being if you did, I'm going to ask you to keep that in your head and out of the comments. And that's because we're just trying to have conversations to get to strengthen our community and to build each other up rather than tear each other down. And in order to do that, I think we need to keep the comments kind. Now that all of that is out of the way, let's get this show started. Welcome to Politics Not Included, where we get to know the person, not their policy. If you are interested in a candidate's position on different aspects of their elected position, you can visit our website for more information on their stances. But for the podcast, we're here to get to know them as a person first. Today, we're joined by Courtney Hochman, who is a candidate for the USD 383 school board. If you live within the 383 district, you can vote for candidates in this race on or before November 4th. If you live outside of the district, you can visit your county's election website to find more information on your candidates. Courtney, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here. To get us started, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? You're a PhD student, right?
Yes, I have 2 more classes before dissertation. My degree is in higher education, student life. I have a master's in a similar degree, counseling and student development, and then my undergrad's kind of broad interdisciplinary social science, women's studies, and American ethnic studies.
Mm-hmm. So are you pursuing your PhD full-time right now? Or
No, the way that the degree is set up, I only have 1 class at a time for where I'm at, and so that's really good for time management.
Yes.
And I have, a family life that allows me to do that. So it's been good to not be a full-time student.
Yeah, I get that. My husband's actually going back to school for a master's degree, and he had 3 credits at a time, slow and steady getting there. And yeah, if you have kids, it's kind of a nice balance to
absolutely
be able to make progress in that and still tend to your family.
Absolutely.
So you're obtaining that degree from K-State.
Yes.
And your master's and BA were also
from K-State.
And you're from California, right?
I am originally from the Bay Area of California. I'm from Alameda, which by definition is an island, which is just fun to tell people, technicality. I've been here 25 years. I came out for my undergrad and never left. I tried to leave a couple times. I went to Lawrence and tried KU for a semester, and that wasn't the right fit. I went to Minnesota for a semester, and that was too cold.
I can imagine.
And so you just, you find where you're supposed to be. So,
So what drew you to Manhattan and K-State when you were first coming to Manhattan?
Well, part of it is I have an older sister that lives in Raleigh, and so I had visited the area and thought it was really nice. I actually did my first semester of college in San Francisco. One of the reasons why I came out to K-State or anywhere out of state was because, and it's actually part of my journey with education and being an advocate, is that my high school was really gatekeepery about college information. And so where you only needed 2 years of math to graduate high school, you needed 3 to get into any California state school.
Oh, wow.
And so some of the counselors would make a decision about who they thought was college preparatory and who wasn't. And math wasn't my strong suit. So I kind of fell in the hole and didn't want to go to community college. And so I decided after the first semester at a really progressive school in California, in San Francisco, that I wanted that full, kind of cornball movie college experience with residence halls and football games and more traditional path.
So for that math, would you have to know on your own that you're supposed to take 3 math classes?
I think it's better now. No, it absolutely is their job. And I think that's how I kind of, ended up in a counseling field, advising field, is to make sure that students know, what their requirements are, what their path looks like, what their options are, because sometimes, especially with young students, with high schoolers and incoming college students, first gen, I was also a first gen and came on campus and didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So just making sure, people have that information. So like I said, we had a really wide range of socioeconomic groups in my high school and in my city. And like I said, the counselors just kind of made these somewhat arbitrary decisions. And I think it's also important that just because you might not be as successful or like an elite high school student, that doesn't mean that you won't be successful in higher education, because it's quite different.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I can relate to that too. In high school, you may not come into realizing that you love education or you love learning until later in life. I wouldn't say that I excelled in high school, but have been in higher education and love learning. And so to have somebody there that's willing to guide you and help you get through is so important. And my husband was the same way, that, in high school didn't seem like he was going to be, the most confident student. And obviously you can grow into that later. You're still young, but you need that kind of guidance.
Absolutely.
At the start.
Well, and, reflecting back, I think we put a lot of pressure on high school students that they're supposed to know what they want to do for the rest of their life or what they want to study. And, fields that I've been in and areas where I have degrees I didn't even know existed. Like, I did not know that was a job.
Yes.
I remember talking to my grandparents and trying to explain, what the field was when they only understood like doctor, lawyer, dentist, teacher, and that's fine. But, there's so much more. And even within disciplines, you'll find like little tracks of specialties that you get into.
Yeah, you really have no idea what's out there until you just stumble upon different opportunities. So my background is in meat science, and who would have ever thought that that's a career path? So,
right.
Yeah. That's really great to hear that somebody is there and wants to kind of guide and provide those opportunities in that way. You've been in Manhattan for, you said
25 years.
So what about, you came to Manhattan, you said you left, you've gone to KU, to other areas. What do you think keeps drawing you back to Manhattan?
It's a really unique place, and that's, what I try to tell people when it's like, oh, you live in Kansas. It's like, yes, but, especially with the image of flyover states and, people that have never, spent a lot of time in the Midwest. Manhattan's really unique because of the military population, because of the university population, and even, in a different way, the tech college and the Christian college. There's just lots going on. There's enough going on where you can feel fulfilled. And honestly, Topeka, Salina, Kansas City aren't that far away. So you have access to bigger things. But for living, for raising kids, for studying, it's a good place. Mm-hmm.
Did you meet your husband here, or did you guys meet in California?
No, we met here. Our anniversary is next week.
Oh, congratulations.
6 years. We had mutual friends but never met, and then stumbled upon each other. And it's funny because we both came like the same year. He came here for his master's about the same time I came for my undergrad. And so just different paths. He's from Ohio. So yeah.
Yeah. And you worked at K-State for a period of time?
I have worked at K-State on and off. My most memorable and I think the job that taught me the most was working for Honor and Integrity, which I was teaching the sanction class for academic dishonesty. So it's a class no one wants to take.
Is that like you have to go take that because what is it?
So if you had an occurrence of academic dishonesty, like your first infraction, it can be decided between, and there's a council that has student representatives and faculty representatives to decide, what kind of discipline to receive. And so if it's a lesser, like a plagiarism, something like that, cheating on a test, because some professors have very different ideas about how that should be handled, which is why there's a council. So there's fairness and objectivity. So then one of the options is to take this course, Development and Integrity. And I learned so much just from the experience of teaching it because there are people from every background, every department, I don't think I had any PhD students, but master's students, international students, domestic students, athletes, just everybody. And, I think it really shows the stress that higher education can put on you and that desire to succeed and live up to standards, whether those are yours or your department, your family. Mm-hmm. And so, just kind of recognizing like, okay, you made a mistake. We're human, that happens. But here's some ways, to make different decisions. We worked a little bit on like citations, because that was another thing I learned is that in some countries, they don't have citations because when you read and learn the information, that information becomes yours. And so there are some cultural things. Yeah. There are some, where folks would just say like, well, yeah, I made a mistake. I, took this off the internet. I will say though, I'm sort of glad I'm not in that right now with all of the rise of AI and, getting through that murky stuff. Glad I don't have to deal with that. But it was a great experience because of the breadth of students and trying to, figure out where the breakdown was. Was it because you didn't know where you could access assistance if you were having major life stressors, if you had a learning disability, where to get assistance or accommodations for that. So some of it, was a real student life, resource pathways, but also things like citations and just looking at, why people make these choices.
Yeah, that's an interesting background. How did you get into that? Was it?
So when I was doing my master's, when I taught it the first time as a student assistant, it was actually a practicum for like capstone kind of thing. And then later on, a friend who is the director of Honor and Integrity was looking for not full-time, but, a non-student worker to teach the course. And so I got to come back and do that for a few semesters.
Do you think that part of that experience and coming back is the reason why you're pursuing your PhD, or was that always a part of what you saw your future being?
I think it's always been a part of it, just that thirst for knowledge, my path, and you might have a question about this later when it comes to family. My path has had, many different ups and downs and, offshoots. But, to be competitive in the higher education world, you really need that terminal degree. So thinking about, do I want to work at K-State or another institution? I need those letters. Yeah. Plus it's just, the sense of accomplishment and, personal gratification of earning that.
Yeah, they always say that nobody can take away your degrees. So.
Absolutely. And that's what I tell students, and I've had friends, with high schoolers who are like, I'm so tired. I don't want to go. The culture is, affecting my learning or whatever. And it's like, just finish it, because then you have it. And, whatever you do next, you can figure that out. But you've finished this portion. That's the important thing to tell the students that turn 18 their senior year. It's like, no, come on, stick it out, please.
Yeah, just keep going a little
just
bit
do
longer.
It for you.
Yeah, so you're running for the school board, and then you're on the path for the PhD. What would your ideal next step be? You're elected, and then do you want to stay in higher education and do both, or what is your ultimate goal in that journey? Or still unknown. Unknown is a perfectly great answer too.
Ultimately, yes. I see myself working at some sort of institution. Since it's, I have a counseling background, and I want a desire to be, hands-on frontline kind of advising position, whatever that looks like. That's where my passion is, that advocacy. And that's also, a big reason why I'm running for school board. It's being able to advocate for all students, the families, the staff, and understanding how those parts work with being advocates for our taxpayers and making good decisions that benefit our whole community.
And you're a mom of 3.
I am a mom of 3. Hey, guys. So I have a 16-year-old who'll be starting his sophomore year. He has some significant medical issues and disabilities. So he's in what they call the Life Skills program. Actually, I think they just renamed it, but and now I can't remember what it's called. But, special education.
Yeah.
And so that has given me a different perspective of the district, of the schools, of the school experience, different relationships with teachers and paras, administrators. And so I think that gives me a unique thing to bring to the table that I haven't seen from other friends who have been on the board. And then my middle child is 10. He's going into the 5th grade. He is, super bright, avid reader. So he's given a different experience. He's also what I refer to often as a COVID kindergartner. So he's one that his 2nd year of preschool was abruptly ended. Entered kindergarten in a blended format. So he was, home virtual some days, basically for a check-in, and then was at school halftime. And so, dealing with missing some of those social emotional lessons of cooperative learning and sharing materials because everyone had their own for safety reasons, that gives a different perspective. And then I have a 4-year-old daughter who's going into her 2nd year of preschool, and nothing prepared me for that. Nothing in my life has prepared me for that. But getting to experience all the levels of education in our district and different involvement over the years, I have a breadth of information and perspective to offer. Plus, I'm in it for the long game. I've got a high schooler, and an elementary schooler and a preschooler. So I'm not going anywhere for a while.
And they're all in the school system.
And they're all in 383.
Yes.
Have been all 3 of them since preschool. And so, it's, I know some people come in later, like when their kid's in high school, because that can give some freedom. It's but they might have, different intentions than somebody who's going to be here. It's I'm thinking about what this is going to be like in 10 years, so I think that has a different drive as well.
Yeah. And is it safe to say that they're a big part of why you're running, or, your education background probably plays a role into it too. So maybe it's a perfect storm, but I imagine having kids too is a driver.
It is a perfect storm. Like I said, I'm all about advocating for all students and families in our district, all stakeholders. And so, my kids give me one perspective. And so like my oldest son, Eddie, and his experience with special education, and his friends and classmates and what their different needs and experiences are, and my middle kiddo and his friends. And so I have access to a lot of opinions and struggles and blessings and things like that, where I can bring back to the table and say, here are some diverse thoughts about issue X. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's, beneficial to be able to share those perspectives.
Do your kids understand that you're running for this role and like what that may mean? Or are they excited, nervous, just maybe don't care?
Both. No, they care. So I ran 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, Violet was 2, so she probably doesn't remember mm-hmm. much about this, but they understand. We've had a lot of conversations about, why I'm doing it, what that looks like. Yes, mommy will be at some meetings, but that it will help, them and their friends and people, in our community have a voice at the table and get what they need. And so they're excited. They like the attention. They like seeing signs all over town. It's not sign time yet. There are rules. But then sometimes, it also gets exhausting. Like, Mom, why do you have to talk to everybody? Oh, yeah. So there's a good balance, but that also comes from having lived here so long. It went from, Mom, wow, everybody, to, Mom, do you have to talk to everybody?
Like if you go to the grocery store or somewhere, you
absolutely.
get stopped by somebody.
Absolutely. And I think my connectedness, I've been a resource in the district for many years, where people will be like, hey, XYZ, can you point me to who I need to go to get these answers? Or do you have the answer? And so that's the benefit of, having been in the district for 13 years.
Mm-hmm. And on your website, you've been involved in the community in different ways. I think it said the Kansas Interagency Coordinating Council on Early Childhood Development. That's a long name.
Yes, my dad used to say that, I picked things by, what has the most words, like my bachelor's in interdisciplinary social science, can't you just do something, I'm not in charge of what things are called, but yes. Yeah. So that has been a really awesome experience as a parent member on that council. It is a governor appointment, and I meet with all of the agencies that provide for 0 to 5 students children that may have exceptionalities, whether that's a learning disability or language, students that will come into preschools or even pre-preschools with like parents as teachers in Tiny K that have been identified as, at risk, whatever. That means so many things in so many different arenas. So getting to hear like what Parents as Teachers is doing, what the School for the Deaf, the School for the Blind, we have so many resources, and how those things play into our district. And it's been great to make connections. It's, even though I don't, my kiddo has my sped kiddo has aged out of that, I can still, relay experiences and then share from other friends. 'Cause like, if you have a kid with exceptionalities, like there's no handbook for children anyway, but you hopefully meet someone and fall into a network of other sped parents. And, so we have friends who are much younger. It's like, how do I navigate this? And so I can bring some of those stories back to the council and say, what are we doing about this? And it's also great to hear about what's going on in the state, because rural areas do things differently than more urban areas. But yeah, it's been awesome.
And if you were elected into the position, do you see yourself going out to events and trying to gather information from the community, or like, do you have a plan for trying to stay engaged with the community in that role?
Absolutely. And that's something that I already do. Yeah. And when obviously when there's, family appropriate events, like, getting my kids active and wanting to be, full members of their community and be engaged. I think it's, you don't just take an elected position and then, and that's it. It doesn't end. I try to share, I'll be having a post later about last night's school board meeting. And so that's one of the things that is allowing me to do this, is that our family life is stable. My son's health, last summer he had spinal surgery.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So, I have a privilege of having this time where some SPED parents are just trying to keep their head above water. I mean, it's not just about the SPED students, it's about everyone. But I think that lets me see things globally with other maybe marginalized groups and experiences. But yeah, that civic engagement doesn't stop once you get into the office. I want to share as much information and break it down into, more easily digestible than reading, like, I'm trying to think how many pages the board member packet was last night, over 150 pages of, very detailed things so you could find what you need. But like, what were the big bullet points? What does someone, need to know? Where are we at in the budget cycle? Things like that, that people that don't have students are also, very invested in.
Yeah. One thing that has become more and more clear as I've started doing this is, people that run for the school board, city commission, you're part of the community, and you're not a career politician.
Correct.
This is something that you're doing because you want to support the community. And so you don't have background training in a political campaign. No. Has there been anything that's been like you weren't expecting, or roadblocks in the campaigning process, or like what has that part of this been like for you?
Not really, thankfully. I think part of that is the interconnectedness in the community, existing and past school board members that, have been open to mentoring and helping guide. It was a lot rougher 2 years ago. There were 10 candidates for 4 seats.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a completely different race this time. Also, having done something once, it makes it easier to do the next time. But like you say, I'm not a career politician, unlike some people that, run for school board or city commission. I'm not using this as a stepping stone to get onto further political aspirations. Like, this is my lane, this is my passion, and what I want to do for my community, how I can give back. School board is an elected official that is a volunteer. This isn't a paid position. This certainly isn't necessarily a glamorous position, but, that's how we get stuff done, is by having, good, knowledgeable people on the board.
So in the 2023 election cycle, was there a primary in that one, right?
There was not. It was just under, because I
11.
think it's times whatever the open seats times 3 plus 1. It's
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah.
Some sort of weird math problem. So we escaped the primary. Although I do sometimes wonder what it would have been like if we had a primary and kind of narrowed down those folks. But
yeah. Do you have, I've already asked you that one. So that wraps up most of the questions that I have for you. I have a couple more that I will ask everybody at the end of the interview, but I do have one more before we jump into that section.
Okay.
Is there anything that you would like people to know about you before going to cast their vote this year?
I think, the thing I ask of everyone is just be informed, be engaged. There are lots of opportunities for forums. There are, podcasts like this. Mike Madsen did his radio show and has invited all candidates from both races. So just, be informed and, vote for the person that's right for you. Last cycle, 2 years ago, I said, I might not be the right choice for everyone, but I will be the voice for everyone. And that's okay. You know, our vote, you know, we're all entitled to our one vote, and that represents who we are and what we want and what we're aligned with. And so just, you know, vote authentically by being informed.
Mm-hmm. And then I have 3 questions that will wrap us up here.
Okay.
Do you remember the first time you voted?
I do. I was really excited. But prior to that, I actually, my senior year of high school, I volunteered to work at a polling place on election day. And so, you know, there was the excitement of, first of all, getting a day off school for an authorized thing, and you weren't sick, but, you know, an extra credit for government class and things like that. But it was fun to see the process. You know, I remember my parents taking me with them to vote when I was little, but, you know, not being able to vote in that particular election, but being there, you know, meeting neighbors because you're checking them and you see their address. Oh, hey, you're my neighbor. Mm-hmm. Also, it was the year of the hanging chads. So, you know, getting to experience the evolution of election formats. So like from a paper punch card to now, you know, you press a button and prints out a receipt. I think it's a really important civic duty and privilege. And, you know, there's also the, you know, idea that, well, if you don't vote, you can't complain. But more than that, it's a responsibility. I remember, you know, going in that first time and being nervous and like, you know, I'm making a choice. I get to be represented. So yeah, that was really cool. And like I said, my parents would take me with them. And so it's always been instilled in me that this is important to do. Mm-hmm.
And you kind of touched on the second one, which is like, yeah, why is voting important to you?
You know, especially the smaller elections, the local elections like school board and city commission. Some people think they aren't as important because the presidential elections get, you know, blown up and it's important as 4 years and, you know, should be a holiday and all of these things. But it's those local elections that really make a difference in your day-to-day life. And so, you know, not everyone has, and I'm not saying I have all the time in the world to do this, but, you know, to learn about the people who are representing you, to learn about issues that are going on in your community or at your school district, helps you be a more engaged citizen. But also, you know, I think we do it naturally and don't even realize, like, you have a conversation with somebody about something and it might get into, you know, something that's going on in the city or the school district. And so, you know, even though you might not be like, hey, I want to tell you all about this candidate, you know, but you can spread information, you know, in other more casual ways. Mm-hmm. And so that's engagement too.
Yeah. And how can people find you to connect with you or follow along with your campaign?
Well, so I would say that the campaign season is really just starting now, almost. You know, we had to file, excuse me, by June 1st in case there needed to be a primary. So it seems, I feel like I've been in it a long time. I was also the first to file. I filed on my middle kiddo's birthday on March 4th because I wanted to March 4th. But, you know, and that was meaningful, and he came with me to file. So I have a pretty active Facebook. I have a website. I'm trying to get more information from groups about when they'll be having forums and panels so that I can put that out there. It's like, where will Courtney be? Mm-hmm. You know, or at other meetings. I encourage, you know, individuals to reach out via email or messenger or whatever if people want to meet and ask questions, or even, you know, as a Facebook comment. I'm also going to set up some informal, like, coffee chats around town as, you know, things get a little less hectic, maybe. No, when you have 3 kiddos at 3 different levels of school, it's, you know, it's fun, but they go back next week. So that'll change my availability. But yeah, I'm always available to talk to people.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been nice to talk to you and to get to know you a little bit better.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, you can follow along on our social media pages for announcements for new episodes. You can find us on Instagram at Transparent Campaigns, Facebook at the Transparent Campaign Initiative, and then our website is transparentcampaigns.org. Thanks for joining us.